At first glance, Jarl Balgruuf the Greater appears to be a strong, pragmatic leader singularly focused on the good of his people and his hold. But when we dive deeper into the mind of this conflicted Jarl, cracks in his armor begin to appear. Is his decision to remain neutral for as long as possible a strategic masterclass, a desperate hope for peaceful reconciliation, or a testament to weak-minded indecisiveness? Jarl Balgruuf had the benefit of being born into nobility, a privilege that would shape his worldview from the beginning. A direct descendant of Olaf One-Eye, the ancient and powerful Nord king, Balgruuf was destined for political power. By the time he inherited his title as Jarl of Whiterun, Skyrim was already beginning to fracture. As a man born and raised in Whiterun, the jewel of Skyrim's plains, the crossroads of culture and commerce, Balgruuf knows in his heart that any show of weakness could ripple across the entire province. Culturally, he was groomed in the traditional ideas of Nord life: honor in battle, strength in leadership, and pride in the frozen north he calls home. But alongside these traditions, he's watched the slow decay of the Empire and the strain it places on Skyrim's independent spirit. By the time we meet him in the year 201, Balgruuf is no stranger to the ugliest sides of leadership. A civil war, dragons ravaging the land, and the sudden return of the Dragonborn, all boiling towards a question that no Nord ruler has had to ask in generations. Do I remain loyal to the fatherland, or to the empire that once united mankind? Psychologically, Jarl Balgruuf exhibits traits consistent with both authoritarian benevolence and cognitive dissonance, a loving tyrant torn between king and country. He firmly believes he knows what's best for Whiterun, even if the people disagree or don't see the full picture. As he says repeatedly, Whiterun is his hold, his city, and what he says goes. That control, in his mind, is always justified by the greater good. Balgruuf doesn't view Whiterun as subject to the Stormcloaks, the Empire, or even the will of its citizens. His focus isn't political neutrality, it's sovereignty. His care for Whiterun expresses itself through firm authority and moral justification of that authority. You get the sense that if Whiterun voted to join the Stormcloaks, he'd reject it, not out of pride, but because he'd believe it to be the wrong choice for them. As seen in his conversations with his advisor, Preventus, Balgruuf rarely lets the council of his cabinet override his benevolent autocracy. Balgruuf listens, but he doesn't negotiate. This is a key trait of a benevolent authoritarian. He doesn't rule out of cruelty, he rules with protective certainty. He sees himself as the steward of Whiterun, tasked with making the hard decisions that others are too afraid to make. Ironically, this mindset is in direct contrast to the indecision caused by his cognitive dissonance. He spends much of the Civil War questline hesitating, unsure of which side to choose if forced. Few lines reflect his psychological tension better than this. If it's the war you're referring to, I'm on the side of Whiterun. No doubt General Tullius and his friends in the Empire would tell you that I owe them my loyalty, and perhaps I do. Ulfric Stormcloak would say that I owe my allegiance to the Nord people as they fight for Skyrim's independence. Perhaps this is also true. The day might come when I am forced to draw my sword for one side or the other, but that day has not come yet. In this, he acknowledges obligations to both sides, and in doing so, reveals his inner conflict. His cognitive dissonance leads him to delay, to rationalize, and to postpone. Ultimately, Balgruuf is a ruler caught between two worlds, striving to do right by his people, but stuck in a paralysis of conflicting loyalties and over-analysis. Beneath Balgruuf's bold exterior lies a man afraid, not of dragons or rebels, but of failure. His deepest fear is losing control of Whiterun, not just militarily, but symbolically. If Whiterun collapses, Skyrim collapses with it. That's why he insists, again and again, this is my city. His fixation on control isn't rooted in fantasies of power, but in panic. A fear that chaos will swallow what he was raised to protect. But it's not just external threats that he fears. Balgruuf is also terrified of making the wrong choice. It's not that he's afraid to make a decision, it's that he's afraid to make the wrong one. The one that would most upset the homeostasis, the fragile balance of Whiterun and its people. If he sides with Ulfric and Whiterun burns, if he sides with the Empire and the Nords never forgive him, then he becomes the villain in his own story. His authoritarian benevolence becomes a shield, an attempt to impose order where there is none. His cognitive dissonance becomes a crutch, a reason to pretend he still has time. And in the end, we're left with a man trapped between duty and fear, using the tools of control and justification to keep himself distant from the chaos knocking on the doors of Dragon's Reach. Balgruuf's psychological struggles don't stay buried. They manifest in his behavior. His most telling pattern is his prolonged neutrality. He delays choosing a side in the Civil War for as long as possible, claiming it's to protect Whiterun from being embroiled in the conflict. But this delay isn't noble. It's a strategic misstep. The longer he postpones, the less time Whiterun has to prepare. Eventually, war comes to his doorstep and Balgruuf is forced to react, scrambling to fortify a city that could have been ready. It's the kind of vulnerability he would never tolerate on the battlefield, yet he tolerates it in the comfortable walls of his palace. And that's the irony. When real, physical threats emerge, Balgruuf springs into action. When Riverwood is threatened by dragons, he doesn't hesitate. He overrules Proventus, sends soldiers, and empowers the Dragonborn to act. But why? Because dragons don't represent moral conflict. There's no cultural tension in defending your people from fire raining on their homes. No divided loyalty. No cognitive dissonance. But the Civil War, that's different. Choosing a side means betraying a part of himself, the empire that kept the peace, or the Nordic identity that raised him. So he stalls. It's not because he's indecisive, but because he's torn. And the worst part is, he must know that the day is coming when the postponement of his decision will cost him the lives of his subjects. And from where does this all unfold? Dragon's Reach, the seat of his power, and a near-perfect reflection of Balgruuf himself. Proud, elevated, isolated from the noise of the outside world. A fortress built to hold dragons, perched above a city on the brink of war. Balgruuf is the personification of Dragon's Reach, the strong but isolated overseer of the plains of Whiterun, quick to act when danger is clear, but paralyzed when danger wears the face of his own people. Deep beneath Balgruuf's conscious reasoning lies a set of beliefs and instincts he's never confronted, but which govern his actions all the same. Raised in Whiterun, a city at the crossroads of Skyrim, both geographically and culturally, Balgruuf is a child of two empires. On one side, he carries the unspoken inheritance of the Nords, self-reliance, warrior honor, and mistrust of foreign rulers. These values are not taught as doctrine. They're breathed in, passed down through hearthfire and heritage, battlefields and blizzards. But at the same time, Balgruuf has grown up under the long shadow of imperial order. He's seen the supposed benefits of centralized governance, peace, infrastructure, trade, and diplomacy. He's absorbed the idea that loyalty to the empire means loyalty to mankind. Without even realizing it, Balgruuf has come to embody the tension between these two worldviews. His authoritarian benevolence mirrors the empire's philosophy, firm rule for the sake of stability. But his pride, his emphasis on sovereignty, and his refusal to be pushed around, that is the spirit of Skyrim. The result is a man split in two, not because he's indecisive as a man, but because he's inherited two legacies that were never meant to coexist. He doesn't know it, but in trying to preserve Whiterun, he's really trying to preserve balance between the two halves of himself, the image bearer of the Empire and the son of Skyrim. Jarl Balgruuf the Greater is not a visionary. He doesn't claim enlightenment. He does not aspire to reshape the world. He only wishes to preserve it. Balgruuf is a man shaped by inheritance, by the tension between legacy and responsibility. His rule is not fueled by conquest, but by a belief that his continued leadership is essential to Whiterun's survival. He wants to remain in power not for ambition's sake, but because he sees himself as the last wall between his city and collapse. In this, he echoes King Priam of Troy, a ruler from Greek mythology not known for bold conquest, but for pleading with fate from within crumbling walls. Priam begged Achilles for his son's body, not as a warrior, but as a father. And like Priam, Balgruuf does not command the battlefield. He commands the threshold, doing everything he can to delay the destruction just a little while longer. Balgruuf behaves like a man holding an umbrella over his child in the middle of a hurricane. He can't stop the storm, but he believes it is his duty to shield what he can for as long as he can. It is a loud and desperate defiance, one that confuses inaction for protection. Psychologically, he falls high in neuroticism, particularly neuroticism under moral pressure, a trait linked to deep anxiety and indecision in the face of moral pressure. Studies show that individuals like this often delay difficult choices not out of cowardice, but out of intense fear of choosing wrong. They second-guess, overanalyze, and become consumed by the emotional weight of potential consequences. Balgruuf's prolonged neutrality isn't a political tactic. It's a symptom. He delays because the war splits him in two. One part loyal to the order and civilization the Empire claims to protect, and the other bound to the rugged independence and ancestral pride of the Nords. He seeks only to hold his world together, even as it falls apart around him.